Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 817 podcast. It's been a big week in Fort Worth news, and we've also got a really exciting guest today, so we're just going to dive right in. Starting with maybe some of the biggest news of the week is that the redistricting task force has picked a new map to recommend to the city council. So when the task force met earlier this week, they recommended Map X with a couple caveats to go before city council as the map for Fort Worth's new city council districts. It was kind of interesting the way that the meeting played out. Like, they were talking about, people were presenting, they were talking about the maps. Map X has kind of been the favorite for a while. It had the most points coming in from the previous session when they reduced down to 9 maps, and they kind of had to look around and say, are we allowed to make changes to the maps? Like, what is our role here? Eventually, someone with the city said, no, you can't change the maps significantly, but you can make recommendations along with the map that you choose. And the biggest piece of Map X is that this would create the opportunity for a minority majority on city council, with having 5 minority opportunity seats. That's something that, we've advocated for, that has been a major focus of
Wouldn't that make it equal, by the way?
Process.
Would it make it equal?
That would make it equal with the opportunity to win the mayoral spot.
Gotcha.
So I think that's how they were viewing it, as getting to 6 out of 11. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. Like, we've talked about how Latinos don't vote as a bloc, but this potentially gives the best opportunity for a minority majority council that really reflects the city. And then the couple of caveats were that Como was still standing up and saying, hey, we want to be included in a district that reflects who we are and that is represented by somebody who we feel represents us well and correctly. And so that's one of the major things that's going to the city council, that we'll now see if they're going to take the recommendation of the task force, how they're going to maybe change or alter some of the map, or who knows, they could go with something entirely different. But that was a major step in the process this week.
Awesome. Well, we're going to keep updated on the meetings and what we do with selecting maps. Maybe eventually have someone on the pod to also kind of take us down and give some perspective. We're going to now move. Oh, you got
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another major piece of this is that this map would group all of East Fort Worth together for the first time since we've been at this size of council. And so when we've talked about common interest groups and people that feel like they need to be represented together, wanting to stay together, it definitely feels like Map X was a step above everywhere else. So yeah, we're really interested to see what the city council does with this now. And I mean, basically everybody would be running for a new district or a significantly altered district from what they have now. So it provides a lot of really different, unique opportunities for the council going forward. And I'm just very intrigued to see what city council does with it from here.
Most notably, Map X cuts down Chris Nettles' district to create a new District 11 in Southeast Fort Worth.
Yes, so of the 2 new districts being created, one was up north and one was in the southeast section of Fort Worth, whereas most of the other maps were creating 2 new districts in North Fort Worth.
And, you know, we kind of mentioned this idea around community interest groups feeling like selective packing. I think it's interesting wanting to all be together, will we do better dividing and conquer with, if you have an 80% African-American group, what powers could you do at a 40%? If you divide, you split into 40% into two districts where there are also Latino representation plus progressive Caucasians, could you do more dominating districts than being together? But that's just me conspiracy theorying with the Illuminati. But let's go. Let's keep going. Let's go ahead and dive into the other one, which was really great work by the Star Telegram. Fort Worth Report also had stories on it. But the court grants BNSF Railway a restraining order to blocking railroad unions from striking. A U.S. direct court judge on Tuesday granted Fort Worth-based rail company BNSF a temporary restraining order blocking two of its unions from striking. Now, the unions were striking because the two unions represent 17,000 railroad workers, but they were striking because by February 1st, over an availability policy that was going to change how workers and their schedules worked and separating them from their families. Under the new system, every conductor and engineer were going to receive 30 points. And if they wanted to take time off, they would get points deducted. This was interesting. I know you kind of have points on how are you able to, before I dive into like the new system and kind of explain what BNSF was trying to do, I know you have some just macro takes on how can you restrain a union.
Yeah, I just don't understand it. I'm like, don't unions exist to like bring balance to these companies and give power to workers? And even the judge in this case was like, I mean, does it really matter what I rule? Like, both sides are going to appeal this as soon as I rule it. But I just don't understand the dynamic of like, how is a court able to say whether you're able to go on strike or not? That power lies with the people. If they want to go on strike, they can just go on strike. But obviously, there over the past year and a half have been significant changes to supply chains globally, and we're seeing it more and more now. And so BNSF going on strike, like the largest railroad in the country going on strike, would have massive implications on supply chains across the country. Yeah. So, I mean, I was overall very confused by this, but also like the implications of this are massive.
Yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't more like national news about it, in my opinion, because of the implications. Like if I go into Google right now, put in BNSF news, like it's all local. Like there's not, you don't see Bloomberg on it, you don't see Wall Street Journal on it, CNBC, kind of those economy base, financial base. That's what's really interesting. So maybe depending on what happens here, February 1, because I believe the union, as of Thursday, as we're recording, hasn't responded back what they're going to do because of this kind of court order. So we'll keep kind of track on it. But let me kind of dive into the how they're going to use this kind of point system. So basically, different days were given point values. Being unavailable to work Monday to Thursday is a 2-point deduction. Being unavailable on Friday or Saturday is a 4-point deduction. Missing Sundays costs 3 points. Workers can earn 4 points back by being available to work for 14 days in a row, including weekends. However, the 14-day clock resets if a worker takes a day off. Lawyers for BNSF say the company needs this new availability policy to make sure it has enough workers to staff its trains. The attorney Donald Monroe cited a statistic in court Monday that only 50% of BNSF's workforce is available to work compared to 90% for the company's competitors, which in my opinion is like, seems like you got issues. Like it seems like your competitors know how to manage humans and have people work there. Seems like a personal problem. But yeah, I mean,
well, so like 14 being available for 14 days doesn't necessarily mean working 14 days straight, but if only 50% of its workers are available, maybe it does mean working 14 days straight. And like,
Yep.
do we want people operating this type of equipment that have been working 12 out of 14 days, 13 out of 14 days, 14 out of 14 days? Like, I don't think so. So I agree with you that if there's that big of a gap between you and your competitors, like clearly your competitors are doing something better than you. Like
Yeah.
this shouldn't be we're going to go to court to try and overrule our workers. This should be, how can we look at what our competitors doing and try and match them better?
And this is like classic capitalists, like, you know,
Yeah.
they love to take and neglect, and, you know, but then when you get beat with the ugly stick by someone else, you're like wanting to try to use the law to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's some meme somewhere of some far-right person saying thanks socialism to this, even though we clearly live in a capitalist system and this is a product of that. But it really is something that we'll have to keep an eye on, because it could have major implications, not just for North Texas, but nationally.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to go to the third story. And by the way, we haven't announced who the guest is. We're going to have Christina Brooks from the Economic Department, a part of the city of Fort Worth, talk about the CDFI program. We're talking about 200, 300 million across, I want to say 5 years, maybe 10. We'll kind of look at it, but you know, of money available to Fort Worthians who are looking to get ahead in their business and their nonprofits. And she shares a lot of great insights.
Yeah.
So, but before we do that, let's get into the third story. It just came out on the Fort Worth Report by Bob Francis. As Fort Worth economy roars, changes coming to the economic development efforts. The story was basically about how Fort Worth is trending positive across like kind of labor, real estate growth, population. It also kind of discussed that I guess there was a meeting on today, January 27th, called the Tarrant County's Real Estate Forecast, and it was a lot of kind of celebration, and that, you know, that Fort Worth is great, like we usually do. But Maddie Parker kind of jumped in and says, we got to do things different. And she really kind of explained how we have to get out of the shadows of Dallas. And a statistic that they shared in the story that was huge was around how 21 headquarters that have moved to DFW, none of it moved to Fort Worth proper. None of them landed in Fort Worth proper. So I thought, and this was information based off of the Dallas Regional Chamber. So I thought that was kind of really big. And then she kind of hits on the Panther Island project that we're working on and that announcement. But man, what a statistic. 21 headquarters moved to DFW, big businesses who employ people, and none of them are in Fort Worth proper.
It's pretty crazy. And even referencing the Panther Island development, there was a story, I think it was Fort Worth Report, already saying from the leader of this project from the Army Corps of Engineers saying that, like, Fort Worth needs to keep up. Like, we're hitting the ground running and Fort Worth needs to keep up. And so it's kind of like, man, are we already lagging behind like a week in and we can't even keep up with the pace that they're trying to get into this? So it really was an interesting thought that, like, we talk about DFW when it's convenient and we talk about Fort Worth when it's convenient, and we can kind of manipulate those two knobs of like, oh, look at what DFW is doing when it's a bright sunny spot, and then look at what Fort Worth is doing when it's a bright sunny spot, instead of,
And oftentimes that means North Fort Worth.
Right.
When we're talking about economic based off of all this.
right, instead of us looking at, oh, look at what DFW is doing and saying, oh crap, like, look at what DFW is doing and Fort Worth isn't getting any piece of that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's this to me just even plays more on the, like, the ramifications of taking forever with Panther Island.
Yeah.
And us also just doing it to ourselves in the sense of making North Fort Worth. Like, I know we need to develop that, and economically there's value there, but we can't just blame it on Frisco and Dallas, even though, again, DFP, Dallas, Frisco, Plano.
Because clearly they've done something better than Fort Worth has to set themselves so far ahead relative to where we are, 20 years removed from starting Panther Island. Yeah.
And it would be cool. I mean, I guess it'd be also interesting to know of the 21, how many is in Dallas proper,
Yeah.
Because even like Fort Worth is such a east-west historically city. I mean, we were the proud West, and it wasn't really until the airport where we really started to be Dallas, really conjoining ourselves with Dallas historically. And I just think like Dallas is such a north-south city with so much going on north. I mean, Frisco is 45 minutes away from Dallas. And I bet, they're bringing in a ton of capital and a ton of companies. So I even think, I wonder how Dallas proper feels about their development. Is this the natural cause of suburbanization, and what happens when we, like, even just from the smallest action of going to better schools and maybe not having the right buildings for corporations to do their work. So they're then building out there. Yeah. And so then people, like you said, are moving closer to the Amazon. So I'm just even wondering, is this it's such an infrastructure conversation, and Fort Worth has been so poor in infrastructure.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we are going to get to our guest. Christina Brooks is the City of Fort Worth's first Chief Equity Officer and Director of Diversity and Inclusion Department. This was created as part of the 22 recommendations made by the Race and Culture Task Force, and she is responsible for leading the department's work in 3 divisions, which are business equity, civil rights enforcement, and municipal equity. Before joining the City of Fort Worth in this position, she served in the City of South Bend's mayor's office as the first diversity and inclusion officer for the city under Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So maybe we need to try and see if we can get the link up to get Mayor Pete on the pod.
I'm sure y'all would have a love fest about the transportation issues of Fort Worth.
Yeah, we would. But we talked about last week the new program that Fort Worth is starting with CDFI loans and giving access to capital for traditionally underserved businesses. And that is a major project that her department has undertaken. And so we're super excited she was able to come on so quickly, that we're able to follow up on that story. And we're really excited to hear from her.
Yeah, so I'm Christina. My Fort Worth story really started over 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, when I got an email from a headhunter asking me if I was interested in this new job in Fort Worth. And at the time, I was knee deep in some major projects in South Bend, Indiana, with then Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And so I was like, no, like not really paying attention to it, but they were persistent. So I ignored them for a while, several months. And then as the year was winding down, the projects were wrapping up, I actually started reading the email and I was like, ooh, Fort Worth, I could come back home. So I am from San Antonio, Texas, and I have a lot of family here in the North Texas area. So I thought this would be a great opportunity after 17 years of living in a place where I didn't have any family around, and having our kids grow up without that family support. This just seemed like a golden opportunity to come back to my home state and serve at home, and give my kids, at least our younger ones, an opportunity to grow up around their cousins. So now they have our youngest daughter has a posse of cousins that she's growing up with, and it's amazing. It's great. So Fort Worth has been such a wonderful place to land and get to know and embrace. The people here are freaking extraordinary. Just absolutely love their city, have a great deal of respect for the history of it, and the people that were a part of the making of this city. And then they also have like this clear idea of what they want Fort Worth to be in the future. And it's just been a great mix of kind of that grounding, stable, we've been here for generations, Fort Worthians, mixed with all of these new people like me that didn't grow up here, but they are just as in love with this place as people that have been here for generations, right? Mm-hmm. And so mixing those ideas together about what Fort Worth is going to look like in the future has been an amazing experience to be a part of.
I grew up a Notre Dame fan and have a lot of family that went there, so I'll say go Irish.
Go Irish!
But
do you know the fight song?
I do know the fight song. I would have to dig deep. I used to know it by heart for sure.
I know you know how it starts, right? Cheer, cheer.
There were a lot of Saturdays spent in front of NBC watching Notre Dame games in my household.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's still lots of Saturdays that are spent watching Notre Dame. So I am, of course, not only a football fan because my husband played there, but I am also a huge Notre Dame women's basketball fan.
Oh yeah.
So a couple of the coaches, one of the coaches is a classmate of mine for the women's basketball team, Coquise, shout out.
Yeah.
she was my classmate at Notre Dame. And then we're really good friends with head coach Neil Ivy. Our kids grew up together, elementary school all the way through. So it's just, and CO, Carol Owens, like just a fabulous group of head coaches with Notre Dame. And so I follow them, and I probably am more of a Notre Dame women's basketball fanatic than I am football. But I don't tell my husband that. Don't tell my husband that.
That's awesome. So, I mean, you've basically been building a department from the ground up in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what you're doing here and what that has been like over the past couple of years?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to step into this role in building the department out of two units that already kind of existed in some form or fashion before my arrival. And then the newest division, municipal equity, was brand new. Like it didn't exist in any form or fashion. But with, the Civil Rights Enforcement Division, which is responsible for the city's enforcement of our non-discrimination ordinance and fair housing, fair employment, public accommodations, ADA, which is Americans with Disabilities Act, and Title VI. And those are just programs that have federal money. They have to kind of follow the human rights guidelines as well. And so they existed before, and the leadership in that division has been a part of that program for over 10 years, and so that was kind of already kind of a well-oiled machine. And then the business equity division was also in existence in a fashion in economic development and it used to go by the Office of Business Diversity. And that leader had been there for about five years when I came on board. And so that office transitioned into our department. And with both of them, to a certain extent, we made some changes, right? And probably more changes happened in the business equity division, seeing as though municipal equity was brand new and everything about it is new to the city. But on the business equity side, we really changed everything from the staff position descriptions, like what our staff actually does now, from what they used to do. It used to be just strictly compliance, looking at numbers, making sure that the numbers were accurate. Did they meet federal guidelines? And they still do that, but there's a lot of technology out there now that can do that a lot more efficiently. And so we've shifted their focus to being more of partners in the process from the beginning. So before, that staff used to just come in at the tail end of when all the decisions were made, and all you have to do is just tell us what the goals are for this project, and then tell us if they met the goal or not. And that was it. And so now our staff actually sit shoulder to shoulder with project managers when the idea comes up that we need to purchase something, or when we know that there's a development project and there's going to be contracting involved, or major procurements, anything over $100,000. And they're sitting down and they're having discussions about equity in the language, everything from the language of the contract to looking at are there things in this contract that are boilerplate but aren't really necessary for this particular contract? Are they presenting barriers to preventing new contractors, and specifically new minority or business equity firms, from participating? And so having those conversations proactively up front, and then sitting in on the evaluation of the bids once they come in, and understanding, looking at the process holistically and not just kind of myopically, and supporting our internal staff as well as our external stakeholders, like our contractors, who really want to understand how we do business. Because, doing business with the government isn't always easy, right? So there's a lot of I's you have to dot and T's you have to cross to be, make sure that you're not breaking any laws. And so helping people, especially new contractors to the process, understand all of that is what we're about. And so now, in addition to all of that, we're focused on building capacity of our businesses. So for the past 25 years, we have had the same goal in the city, right? 25%. That's our annual goal. And there's something strange about that, because over the last 25 years, Fort Worth has grown from kind of a mid-sized city of about a little over 300,000. People don't like to hear this, but this is how they've been characterized, like Dallas's little brother, right?
Yeah.
To a city of almost 1 million people, right? And so if the city is growing exponentially, we're adding about 25,000 new residents every year. Why haven't those goals shifted? You mean to tell me that we don't have any more new businesses, new Black businesses, new Hispanic businesses, new women businesses? What's going on? And so we are trying to get to the root of that now in our department. Like, what is keeping business equity firms? And when I say business equity, what we mean is Black, Hispanic, Native, Indigenous, Asian, and women-owned businesses. That's what we call business equity firms. What is keeping them from either starting, staying in business, or growing? And this is kind of a segue into the new project that we just announced yesterday, which is CDFI Friendly Fort Worth. And what we discovered was access to capital is huge, right? It plays a major part in so many things across Fort Worth, but specifically for small business, access to capital is one of the major barriers for business equity firms to get started. If they don't have it, they can't start, right?
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference in whether or not they stay in business. And it makes a big deal whether or not they stay here, right? So it doesn't mean that we didn't have new businesses in Fort Worth over the last 20 years. It just means either they didn't stay in business or they didn't stay here. And so we're trying to make sure that, they stay here in the 817. And we support them. We support their business in every way that we can. So that's just kind of one way to do that. Then, our municipal equity division is, like I said, it's brand new. And so we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be sitting here, and our department wouldn't really exist in its current form if Fort Worth hadn't had a tragedy, right? Back in 2016. And that gained, unfortunately, national attention. Jacqueline incident with a police officer here went viral and brought a whole lot of attention, national and in some cases international attention to Fort Worth. But the way that Fort Worthians responded was, let's get around a table and figure out how to solve this. What do we need to do? And the Race and Culture Task Force got together. They came up with 22 recommendations across 7 different areas: criminal justice, economic development, education, governance, health, housing, and transportation. And my position in our department were 2 of those recommendations, 2 of the 22 recommendations in governance. And so municipal equity carries on the tracking of those recommendations and supports now our human commission that has taken on those recommendations and trying to figure out, number one, they're under review right now with our human relations commissioners, trying to make sure that, are we measuring the right things? Do the things that we've identified as strategies and activities really help us move the needle in the direction that we want? Or does it just sound good that we're looking at these things? And so municipal equity does that. But the newest and probably the main activity now is the municipal equity plan, where we are looking at equity in municipal service delivery and workforce development. So we have over 20 departments in the city, and every one of them does something for residents in Fort Worth, whether directly or indirectly. And we are identifying what those services are, and we're trying to make sure that it's being done in a way that, as Fort Worth is growing, is equitable. Like we're producing a tool where we can balance new growth in North Fort Worth and all the needs that they have, being a new part of Fort Worth, with inside the loop, inside 820, right? People that are living in the inner city, that their infrastructure is crumbling because we haven't focused on making sure that the streets and infrastructure are at the same level that our newer neighborhoods are. So those are the kind of things that we're measuring in the municipal equity plan, and that's probably the biggest thing on their plate.
Yeah. What are some ways for people to get involved with the CDFI program? Both of us are entrepreneurs, but a lot of people who probably listen to this are business owners or people who are interested in this space. What's kind of the next steps post the meeting yesterday?
Yeah, so this is a great time for y'all to get involved. So if you go to the CDFI Friendly Fort Worth webpage, there's a link where you can register to be a part of the conversations. We're right now looking for people to be a part of the steering committee. We're already accepting potential deals and people that are looking for potential business loans. So far, I think last count yesterday, we had about 130 new loans that are in the pipeline from 0 to 130. And I have no idea. I know when we were sitting at about 75, when there were about 75 people in that pipeline, it was probably, we're looking at 14 million in new financing. So now that we're up to 130, I don't even have the latest numbers of what we're looking at, but that's the kind of movement that we're hoping to see. So if you're a business owner, if you're a nonprofit, if you are an individual that is looking for patient, flexible financing, go to the CDFI Friendly website and drop in what you're interested in learning about. If it's the loan, or if you're interested in being a steering committee member, or potentially a board member, or if you're interested in being, the executive director of that standalone, tell us that. But you can certainly get engaged and start having conversations with the CDFI Friendly team that can connect you with financing from all over the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's awesome that so many, this only started to get publicity, a week ago, 10 days ago, that the Star Telegram and Fort Worth Report started to write articles about this. So it's crazy that there's that much traction already.
Right. Yeah.
What is the process look like for somebody applying for for a CDFI loan?
Yeah. So it's some basic questions. So when you go to the CDFI Friendly website, there's a little, form that you fill out, and it's basically giving basic information about your organization, and kind of what your hopes and dreams are. Why do you need the financing, and how much? And then we have a member of our team call the individual back to have more detailed discussion and gather more information, and then the match starts, right? So we have a network of over 1,250 CDFIs all across the country that specialize in probably every type of financing you can imagine. And so we start the match. We start to look at what the individual or organization's needs are as they describe them. And then we say, okay, there's actually a CDFI in Seattle that does loans just like this, and they're looking for these opportunities. Let me put you together with them, and making sure that, they're ready for that type of financing. So they'll let them know, hey, they're going to ask for these kinds of, financial reports, but it's CDFIs are a little different from traditional lending processes. So they're less likely to look at your credit score and more likely to look at your cash flow. Okay. Would you be able to pay pay the loan back on a regular basis. And then really getting to know you as an organization, as an individual, like you're, so that if something happens, and we all know life happens, they're the ones on the ground that can connect to the CDFI who's not here in Fort Worth and say, look, you know what? I just talked to Joe. He had, a major medical issue, and we need to make sure that his financing stays on track. So a CDFI will be like, okay, as long as we give them enough notice, they'll be like, okay, well, we'll just, stop the payments for a couple of months until he's ready to get back into it, or work out whatever deal needs to get done so that both parties remain stable. Your businesses can keep doing what it does, but also taking into consideration life events, right? That's the big difference between CDFIs and some traditional lenders that, don't have that kind of capacity to build personal relationships with people that they lend to.
With CDFI, besides cash flow, what are some other requirements? I'm assuming Fort Worth address, business, how much of ownership needs to be, a person, a BIPOC person. What's kind of the requirements?
Yeah, so anyone can apply.
Okay.
So you don't have to be Black, Indigenous, person of color to take advantage of this opportunity. We're focused on underserved African American and Latino community and community projects, because that's really at the heart of how CDFIs came to be in the first place, because they understood the challenges that were there. And so that's where we're focused on, making sure that all of these areas in Fort Worth that have traditionally not received the level of financing that's necessary to create quality of life, to build legacy, right? We have just as many brilliant ideas that we want to pass on to the next generations in our family as well. It's just, we need access to capital to do it. And so this is, that's kind of at the heart of it. So it's open to everyone, but we know that statistically, and the research shows us, most recently in the city's MWBE disparity study that really outlined, like, we know there's a gap.
Yeah.
We know there's a gap in access to capital. We know that impacts business formation, and we know that it impacts our ability of business equity firms to stay in business. And so we're focused on prioritizing those types of opportunities to lift them up. We're trying to make sure, I know people use that analogy like, oh, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not everybody is in the boat, right? Like, there's some people out there that don't even have a life raft. They're just in the water. And so we have to make sure that people are actually in the boat and as the water rises, so that, Fort Worth grows. We are building an inclusive economic ecosystem here so that everybody benefits, not just certain neighborhoods, not just certain populations, but everybody.
What else about with underserved? Then is there a, let's just say if anyone can apply, is there a financial level of earnings that you can be maxed at? Or like when you say anyone can apply, underserved, does that mean that their business is just underperforming compared to the average, or does it mean like household income? No limits?
It is really wide open. So CDFIs, Mark gave a great example yesterday. Anything from like people that need a $500 loan individual, what they call consumer loan, but it's really like in lieu of a payday lender
Mm-hmm.
who charges, in some cases, outrageous interest rates.
Yeah, we got one down the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not mentioning any name. I'm just saying those things happen, right? But this is an opportunity to get a much lower interest rate for, a consumer loan. That $400 of liquidity that most people need in a pinch, right? We can do CDFIs specialize in those kinds of loans all the way up to 40 million dollars in financing for development opportunities. Wow. Yeah. So it's everything. Like there's no cutoff. We CDFIs for the last 30 years have been working successfully in that space. So it's the great thing about it is in my line of work, I always hear this this myth that's perpetuated, like, well, to invest in low income areas, it's risky. Well, for the last 30 years, CDFIs have been proving that wrong, right? Mm-hmm. There are people that may not make millions of dollars, but they pay their bills on time and they work hard. And those CDFIs and the banks that back those CDFIs get their money back with interest. And so they're making money in underserved areas. Mm. So this whole idea that it's risky and, like the trepidation in putting money into places that traditionally haven't had it is really, it just blows the water because the facts speak for themselves, right? People that live in lower income neighborhoods, guess what? They eat food too. Mm. They have to buy groceries too. They wear clothes too. And so they're buying all of that somewhere. Why can't it be in their neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Right? They got to go. They're buying food somewhere. They're buying clothes somewhere. It makes no sense for it not to be in their own neighborhood. They're spending money just like everybody else. So
does the loans have to be for a business or a nonprofit though? So you have to at least be a registered sole proprietorship or like, because I'm just thinking, I just talked about the payday loan down the street. We live in the Meadowbrook side, where the two things are popping is Whataburger and the payday loan. I'm here saying, do I get some CDF flyers? And when people walk up, I could be like, well, cow, here's this, turn around. I'm just trying to figure out who can qualify. Does it have to be you have a registered sole proprietorship or nonprofit?
No, like I said, it could be an individual. Wow. It can be an individual. However your business is structured, CDFIs are there and available to work with you. That's why we always say it's patient and flexible.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah. So you're a couple years into this role now. Where do you feel like Fort Worth can grow most in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Right.
What's like top of your department's goals for the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. So we're big on marrying data to stories. Mm. And so we love to hear the stories, the good and of things that are happening here in Fort Worth. But we also want to look hard at the data. And so we want to do a better job at collecting meaningful data that will help us make decisions and looking at whether the data matches what people are saying. Because most of the time, organizations will either look at one or the other. And to get a full 360-degree view of actually what's happening, if people are telling us that in the case of access to capital, that we can't get loans. Like we can't, there's a problem. Like, but then our data suggests that, oh, well, all of our big banks are giving out millions of dollars. Well, dig down into the data to figure out, like, these two are not connecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we did the initial research for CDFI, we found that Fort Worth only had $39 per person, right? And 61% of our census tracts are eligible. And on the national level, the number is $235 per person. So we know by the data that matches what people have been telling us, right?
Yeah.
That they can't get to the money. We know that there's plenty of it here, but putting those pieces together is going to be really important for our department going forward, connecting the dots between the data, the stories that people are telling us about what's happening on the ground, and then finding solutions, viable solutions for us to either remediate or fix or advance or show some type of progress and outcomes that improve people's quality of life. Because that's it at the end of the day, right? I can do a bunch of stuff. I can rattle off 100 things that our department has done. But if it hasn't changed anybody's life for the better, it's meaningless. And so that's what we're going to be focused on over the next several years, is connecting the data to the stories, making sure that our solutions are ultimately making life better for people in Fort Worth.
You mentioned in the presentation yesterday that kind of the success isn't a destination, but a decision. What are some hard decisions Fort Worth has to make to be better at diversity, equity, inclusion when it comes to capital wealth growth for Black, brown, female wealth creators in Fort Worth?
Yeah. We have to deal with facts, right? You can't any relationship that you maintain, you have to be honest with each other, right? Like, it has to be built on truth. And that is the decision, I think, is before Fort Worth. Are we going to deal with each other on the facts, or where the truth of what the history of our city is, the truth of what is happening in our city right now is front and center and clear, and we agree that when we look up in the sky, the clouds, the sky is blue, the sun is bright yellow orange, and nobody is sitting there saying, no, it's purple. We say it's purple. We have to agree on what we know is true. And there was a time, it's crazy because I was talking to my mom about this a couple months ago, that it's crazy that we even have to say that, right? That we have to agree that we do see what we see. Like, there's no oh, you didn't see that. Yeah, we did. So it has to start with facts, and we have to build on something that is true and honest and authentic. We have to heal from a whole lot of stuff that's happened, but we have to be honest about it, right? Like, you can't, if you think about it in medical terms, when you were little and you fell off a bike and scraped your knee, the first thing you did was clean the wound, right? You didn't, you're hopefully whoever your caregiver was didn't say oh, there's no dirt there. Well, just, just go ahead. You're fine. There's no glass. in your knee. Just, keep it moving. You're fine. You clean the wound. And then once the wound is clean, if necessary, you heal it, you suture the wound, you put it back together. And that takes time. It takes love. It takes commitment. It takes wanting the best for the person that was injured. And, that's character, that's integrity, that's, all these things that I see in Fort Worthians. It's going to take that to come to the forefront and be the loudest voice in the room.
Well, Christina, we really appreciate you coming on the 817 podcast and sharing this great opportunity that seems very valuable to a lot of Fort Worthians. We will have the CDFI Friendly Fort Worth.org website in the description because I think this is an exciting opportunity for a lot of people. So thank you for sharing the opportunity and just your overall insight about Fort Worth.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome. Wow. That was fun. I mean, I learned a ton. I didn't know it was that simple. Like, I don't even know how I feel about it, but it just seems like I completely thought it was for like BIPOC but it doesn't seem it could be anyone who needs help with their situation when it comes to businesses or nonprofits.
Yeah, and I mean, the form looks like it takes probably 10 minutes, if even, to fill out.
And we will have the actual form in the description, because I know a lot of people who listen to the 817 podcast are go-getters doing some things in the city. And so at minimum, I think you should fill it out and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Even if you don't qualify or it's not your lane, it doesn't seem too much to hurt.
Click on the link and explore the website because there's a lot of great information on there. And yeah, I mean, it does not seem, it seems like the bar is not necessarily low, but that the goal of this is to be as accessible and equitable as possible. And so there's opportunity for everybody to dive into this.
Yeah.
Are you ready to move into wins and losses?
Let's make it happen.
Go ahead and start with your loss.
Yeah, so my loss is Betsy Price going in. You know what? I think Betsy Price was great for Fort Worth until Fort Worth has gotten conscious. And I would say Fort Worth has gotten conscious maybe, like Ms. Brooks said, Christina said, around 2016 when we were when the national news. But she is having a kind of an advertising truck drive around Tarrant County saying that Betsy Price has did not, fought against Black Lives Matter. And we were all bamboozled, if that's the right word for Fort Worth. We got hustled. And what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, if you missed this, one of her opponents in her primary basically said, Betsy supported Black Lives Matter, yada, yada, yada. And so she did this response video that, sounded like her lectures towards Brian Byrd in the mayoral race. Like, I don't know what's gotten into Brian. That's really what it came off as. And very strongly was saying, like, I didn't stand with Black Lives Matter. Like, I didn't support them. And, that's one thing. Like, yeah, we're gaslit into, and that's the product of Fort Worth having a nonpartisan mayoral and city council. But then we see Fort Worth Weekly post this photo on their Instagram of a literal box truck driving around that on the side of it has Betsy Price's campaign poster that says, did not support Black Lives Matter. And it's just like, we get to see your true colors now. Where this is still relevant is like Maddie Parker a couple weeks ago, we hit on it wasn't going to support voting rights
Yeah.
or the Voting Rights Act. Like, even though we call this a nonpartisan position, we have to recognize who we're working with and what their priorities are going to be, because they have longer term aspirations than just being mayor of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And so for forever, we let Betsy Price peddle this, oh, I'm nonpartisan, I'm a moderate, blah, blah, blah. And we just get to see what her actual viewpoints are now that she's running in a partisan election where she has to appeal to the far right in her primary.
Yeah. You brought this to the table, and so you also brought the other L's to the table. So you want to bring the other two L's?
Yeah, so we're gonna work on a pair of fours for my losses, and that's that the Star Telegram announced that to their editorial board they were going to add 4 far right leaning people to contribute. And they said that they were going to do that because of a dearth of conservative content. I don't... she's, who has ever... Okay, who has ever accused the Star Telegram editorial board of being too liberal or far left other than, I don't know, Steve Panate maybe? Like... let's just look back through these people's endorsements. Just go to the editorial site and scroll through, and it's just essentially a laundry list of conservative, right-wing, hot-button points and opinions that support them. And so, all you had to... Look, the Star Telegram is a business. It's trying to make money. All you had to say is, hey, when we post these articles that really try to own the libs, we get a bunch of clicks and we make more money off of them. So we're going to add 4 people to our team to make sure that we continue to do that.
And all the environmental Arlington reporters, yeah, you guys can go. We're not clickable.
we don't need your subsidized reporters on the environment or local government. Yeah. Get them out of here. We need the opinions that are going to drive some clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just pretty comical, really funny. And then the other one is that since the start of the pandemic, Fort Worth landed as number 4 in the country in evictions. We were behind Houston, Dallas, and Phoenix. That's terrible. Like, we're not big enough of a city to warrant being number 4 in evictions since the start of the pandemic. So big loss to see, especially Texas was very well represented on the list when we have left millions, if not over $1 billion in rental assistance
100.
Unused. $100 million? No,
I said 100, like the 100 emoji. I'm like, big facts.
So much money left on the table. And so nobody in Texas should be on that list. But here we all are because essentially our state and most of our local governments don't seem to believe in actually taking care of people.
Yeah.
I will...
You got a triple L?
No. I'll pivot into my win. That was a lot of negative that I had to spit out there at one time. And I really enjoyed this article from Haley Samsel, formerly of the Star Telegram that we just talked about wasn't worth the subsidized salary. Now in the Fort Worth report, Fort Worth researchers are all in for a moonshot project to catalog all plant life on Earth. If you weren't aware, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas is in Fort Worth, and they are setting out to, literally try and catalog the plant life of the globe as we are losing species because of climate change. They are doing incredible work that is based out of the city that is probably not very well known. And so we just thought it was really worthwhile to highlight them and to make sure we're sending people towards reading that article or listening to it. It's a transcript of an interview that they did. So either way you can consume it, but we have some people doing really incredible work out of Brit, and we need to make sure that what they're doing is well known.
Yeah. My win kind of goes to I have kind of two wins. The quick one is the law. The city gave the abatements to MP Materials for the tax abatements. We did not look at the total project value or what that looked like, but just a quick win. My other big win is for Fort Worth hip hop scene. There is just some great music coming out of Fort Worth hip hop scene. Lou Charles obviously put his album on social now, but it was just kind of private on the Lou Charles kind of group stuff. He just made it on last month on Spotify and all that. Nino So Supreme's second album is amazing. Lil Coon's first album is incredible. And then you also always have XB Valentine doing her thing as well. So just kudos to the hip hop scene of Fort Worth, as I know there's not a lot of room as everybody's busy wearing cowboy hats and tackling calves at this time of the time in Fort Worth.
Yeah, there's a week left of the stock show and rodeo, and then we kind of move into.
I'm over it.
Yeah,
man, it's just so crazy how not good Fort Worth is. I mean, the thing about Fort Worth, we try to be inclusive, and we do a good job. And I'll give us a B sometimes, but we're really good at dressing up as cowboys. We actually know how to live that element. I just feel I could tell all the politicians and all the people who work for the city, they just look so relaxed doing it. They're like, this is my space. I know how to do this. But anyways, we'll get through it.
Yeah, we went into Hatsuyuki last week, and half the people in there were wearing cowboy hats, and it was a very interesting experience being in a small hand roll bar and just having cowboys everywhere. But yeah, we really enjoyed getting to talk to Christina, and hopefully we'll get to continue to have these conversations with her in the future. We've got some pretty exciting news coming up that we'll share probably mid-February-ish. But I think this was a good week. I mean, really crazy the amount of news that was coming out this week, especially relative to coming out of the holiday season.
Yeah, and it's being Thursday, so who knows what happened tomorrow or through the weekend. So we recorded on Thursday to do the interview, and we'll be out this weekend. So if we miss anything, we'll catch it.
Yeah,
episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see everybody next week.
Dopamine swipe. Follow us double tap. Now they control your life.